Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar on key enablers every business needs to boost supply chain efficiency. In this very competitive environment, companies, both single and multi-brand, have to make fundamental changes to meet evolving customer expectations. Specifically, wholesalers and retailers need to find ways to achieve a more holistic and agile supply chain. These changes are essential for companies who want to stay relevant and be more connected to both their suppliers and consumers. It is an honor for me to introduce our two presenters, Ross Elliott and Arvind Gupta. Ross Elliott is the president of TrueCommerce and is an authority in supply chain operations, commerce networks, and software product strategy. TrueCommerce is a global provider of supplier and trading partner connectivity, integration, and unified commerce solutions. Arvind Gupta is the president of Jesta I.S. and is an expert in unified commerce, omnichannel, and merchandising solutions. Jesta I.S. is a global supplier of integrated software for wholesalers and retailers specializing in apparel, footwear, houseware, and electronics. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Arvind to begin this webinar.
Thank you, Esther. So as a starting background to this, for businesses who are trying to be living in a very, very competitive environment, who are trying to deliver unified commerce experience to their customers, there are a lot of implications. And quite frankly, there are a lot of key drivers that are shaping the future of customer service, customer experience, supply chain agility, as well as the overall competitive advantage that businesses continue to want to have. So in those things, as we know, tariffs are continuously being relevant and affecting all the supply chain, especially for products that are coming from overseas and China, leading to some of the importers moving their importing sources to other countries to get the tariff advantage, and that has implications. Same thing goes with overall landscape of traditional brick and mortar retail is no longer comfortable in its own space to say as a main point of interaction with the customer. With Amazon and a whole bunch of new e-com, omni-channel based companies have completely shaken up the customer experience expectations relative to the brands or the businesses they buy product from. And then there's the consumer itself. Increasingly, millennials are now succeeded by Generation Z, anybody who is born after 1995. And that generation has lived in practically social media, and they're expecting the kind of experience and kind of feedback from their brands, from their retailers that was previously completely unprecedented. And there are very large implications for the businesses to take heed to those impacts and figure out how they're going to do something in future that allows them to keep those customers engaged, keep them loyal to their brands, and ultimately work with or partner with the suppliers on the other side to holistically stay competitive going forward. So I'm going to quickly walk you through with traditionally how any company or any product and service company that is in a business of either producing or importing a product and ultimately delivering or selling that product to their customers go through in a typical traditional life cycle. It effectively has typical life cycles are built on linear supply chains, and those cycles always start with designing. Products get designed in head office wherever the design is happening, and once the designs are done, they get gone through, shared with the suppliers, and those suppliers or the supplier networks or the factories will go through sample creation or prototype creation, which once gets validated leads to creation of a full-on order for upcoming season to those factories. And once those products are produced and shipped from wherever the products are getting produced overseas, they get shipped back into head office, distribution centers, and they get received into inventory, which at that point, head office would figure out based on the customer profile and customer needs and the market, how to distribute those products to their customers, either through wholesale or through directly to consumer channels through e-com or through their brick and mortar stores. And once that is done, of course, then they start selling and start planning based on the selling signals for the next season. This traditional supply chain cycle, design to delivery, guess how much time it takes? It's 6 to 9 months. Believe it or not, I'm sure some of you who are in the audience, you would kind of shake your head to that. Yeah, 6 to 9 months, in fact, sometimes is aggressive. And typical cycle could be more than 12 months. So, but this cycle is no longer sustainable in the long run, just because companies, customers, competition, and those forces, driving forces that I mentioned earlier, are continuously bearing down and shaking up the space that most of us are navigating. So, some of the things that are absolutely becoming relevant, which were previously more esoteric, are the notion of agile supply chain and extreme collaboration. So, what does it mean is the following: it effectively means cutting down the overall traditional from design to procurement to delivery cycle into 1 to 2 weeks or up to maximum month. And the way it gets done is by embracing the principles of collaborative design in head office and having collaborative ordering and delivery mindset and processes in place, and finally having collaborative inventory management. And I'll give you some more details about each, but just know that we don't need to go far to know the companies that have embraced the notion of agile extreme collaboration supply chain. Some of the companies that come to mind are purveyors of fast fashion such as Zara, Inditex out of Spain, company called H&M out of Sweden, and recently Uniqlo, which has now come into North America out of Japan. Those companies are completely internalizing the notion of collaborative supply chain, agile supply chain, where from design to delivery cycle is sometimes as little as 1 week. So, what does it mean in terms of more details? When it comes to design, traditionally designers in head office are always having design sessions in their boardrooms, and they have all their designers who have taken inputs from or inspiration from variety of shows, trade shows that they go in, and they figure out what are the products going to look like that might be rhyming with, identifying with, and inspiring their customers. So that's how traditionally it is done. But with the backdrop of distortion in the supply chain that is happening, for example, on tariff, it is now increasingly relevant that the product design takes into account inputs from supply chain teams, your import departments, or even your tariff department to see what could be done in the design that might make it more tariff tolerant as far as the product itself is concerned. For example, one picture I have is this is a product from Columbia Sportswear, where this jacket or this parka, if it was regular nylon parka, it would be enduring or qualified for 24% of tariff. But the moment you put in a very thin waterproof layering on that, it suddenly the tariff drops to that to be 4%. So there's a saving of close to 20% by slightly tweaking the design by taking into account the input from your import department or your importers. So another example is in terms of design. I mentioned that fast fashion company such as Inditex, Zara. When you design, you got to think of designing by taking into account inputs from customers. Let the customers influence and express their individuality through their through your supply chain by influencing the design of the final product. And ultimately, what good is a design if the vendor can't deliver on that within the cost goals that you have for them as the product gets designed in a very distributed supply chain? So having vendors in some collaborative manner on some platform so that they are able to influence and provide inputs, critical inputs of, what they could deliver or how could they deliver in a manner the way you're expecting to be in the cost goals, in the time frame that you want, is hugely relevant in the future. Then it comes to you have done the design, now it comes to ordering and delivery. This is where a whole bunch of things go haywire. And sometimes or more often than not, those variables that are beyond the control of typical import organization or a company could completely make or break your season just because there's a strike, for example, let's say in LA port, where most of the quite a large chunk of product comes from overseas. So what does collaborative ordering and delivery means? It effectively translates to, step number one is, hey, think about collaboration platform with your suppliers. Basically have a platform where your vendors are working with your head office teams collaboratively, looking at whatever you're ordering, trying to figure out what could be done and what could not be done, and most importantly, when things change, to have a complete 360-degree visibility to the orders that are coming from overseas from a variety of suppliers, or when the changes are being suggested by head office, just because customer is customer. If your signals that you previously looked into or took into account when you place the orders are distorted, either by because of tremendously extra demand than what you thought, or lesser than what you anticipated demand, then you want to be able to make changes and make sure the vendors or the suppliers are immediately able to respond to those changes and communicate back, so that you are ultimately able to manage the expectations and take into account the opportunities that may be presenting themselves. So then it comes to, now you've done the product design, you got the orders that are coming in. Then the last degree is where it really takes things to next level, is partnering up with your suppliers, your agents, to do collaborative inventory management. So we have heard the term endless aisle, vendor dropship, never ending aisle, such and such. But that future is now here. It is absolutely possible now, or you want to be able to offer to your customer that doesn't matter which channel you have product with, whether it is in your stores, in your warehouse, it's with your local or distributor agent. It does not matter where the product might be, product that you may not ever carry in your inventory. You want to partner up with your suppliers to be able to offer your endless aisle experience, and also embark on sometimes vendor managed inventory programs. So those things, those programs would require you to open up and share your data and collaborate with your vendors about sales signals, so that they are able to themselves able to rationalize their product forecast and able to deliver and manage to the forecast that they're getting as the product starts getting delivered to the customer. Market sites are getting increasingly relevant as a channel for most of the businesses. So increasingly, it would be very relevant to partner up with your vendors and suppliers to offer up opportunities to move up some of the products onto these market sites and collaborate with them to ultimately holistically manage the customer experience as the product gets delivered or returned back to your businesses. So there's a lot going on here. End of the day, what it boils down to is that the current status quo of the linear supply chain is simply not going to cut it. It's going to require thinking all around all the building blocks that we all know have always in play, but compressing the cycle, taking into account collaboration all around, from the design to the ordering with your suppliers to delivery, and ultimately managing of the inventories in collaboration with all your stakeholders of supply chain, is how things will become really relevant as you navigate future. Now, in order to see what are some of the key tangible next steps where rubber hits the road could be considered, I'm going to pass it to my friend and partner, Ross, to take us through the rest of the story.
Thank you, Arvind. And let me add my welcome to all the participants in the webinar. Appreciate you taking time with us today. I think everything that Arvind's talked about in terms of changing the way we think about the supply chain is echoed in Gartner's comments. And their comments highlighted here are that we have to be more agile, more intelligent, more responsive, more collaborative, meaning we have to be able to react to changes that we may or may not anticipate in both supply availability and customer demand, just in economic conditions. We didn't anticipate tariffs that happened earlier this year, we have to be able to react to those, and the supply chain has to follow. But at the end of the day, I think our big bet is that the easy way to do that is to be connected, to be interconnected with a variety of different types of businesses across the globe, so that when those kind of scenarios occur, we can react to them effectively and appropriately and in a very timely fashion moving forward. Let's move on to the next slide, Esther. We commissioned a survey of our nearly 15,000 customers over the last 12 months, and I won't spend a lot of time on this slide because I think it's a bit of an eye chart, other than to say what we asked them was, in your attempt to be more collaborative, to be more agile, to change the way you think about your supply chain, what are the kinds of tools that you either haven't begun using yet or you anticipate using over the course of the next 12 to 18 months? And as you can see, many of the things that Arvind talked about in terms of inventory management, product information management, vendor managed inventory, order management, advancing supply chain intelligence, all fall into the things that your peers are saying to us as suppliers are important to them to be to be able to compete more effectively in the market that we find ourselves in today. Esther, next slide, please. So as we began to look at the problem that we all face, we started to look at what specific keys have we seen that have assisted our customers in being successful in transforming into this digital world we live in. And we think they fall into 4 categories, and I'll spend a little bit of time with you on each one of those. But effective product information, being able to make sure that I gather, if I'm a retailer, from my brands, and I disseminate it through the various channels that I sell into, having an integrated channel, using a commerce network to connect all of my stakeholders, whether they supply things to me, whether they buy from me, whether they're a marketplace, whether they're a technology provider, into one location. Having a view of global inventory, so I know what I can commit, what I can allocate, how I can work through that, becomes very important. And lastly, to echo Arvind's conversations, it's the collaboration that is really important. It's being able to collaborate with the members of the supply chain, from customers to suppliers, to make sure I've got the right information delivered to the right individual in the right format at the right time, so they can make good decisions on what goes on from that point forward. Let's move to the next slide. So just a moment on product information. I think we all probably have seen the move toward people either buying online or researching online the information about products that they may come to a store to actually purchase. And it's important that what you present to that person, whether it's in the store, online, through a marketplace, is accurate. So being able to assimilate all that as a retailer, if I carry 20 different brands, I've got 20 sets of product information that I've got to make sure that I can manage and meet all of the requirements that I have and that my customers ask of me. Arvind mentioned Generation Z, the millennials that are in the world today. They live in a world of instant gratification. So if you don't have the right information about your product, remember that's the impression they have of your store, your company, is the product information that you present to them either online, in the store, or both. Secondarily, that's the thing, inaccurate product information can be very costly. One of the statistics that we found is that in 2018, we saw a dramatic increase in online buying over the Christmas holiday. 37% of everything that came back to retailers came back as a result of bad product information. The color wasn't accurate, the size wasn't correct, the look and feel of the product was inaccurate, whatever the case might be, the description wasn't there. So product information is key both for your online presence, your marketplaces, and your stores to make sure that you continue to compress and collaborate on that supply chain. Let's move to the next slide. Channel integration. It used to be that someone walked into a store, bought a product, took it home. We don't live in that world anymore. We now live in a world where there are multiple methods for someone to acquire a product. And there are multiple products within a family, some of which you might stock, some of which you might not. And so being integrated from from end to end, as Arvind mentioned in his comments, becomes very important. Now, how do you do that? We would argue that the right way to do that is through a commerce network. There's a concept of a multi-partner digital ecosystem that's coming out over the world today, or you'll hear it called a lot of different things. What effectively it means is it's a series of interconnected businesses that share information from a collaborative standpoint to make sure that the buyer and the seller are very aware of what's going on in terms of availability, delivery, all of the things that go into making sure that the end customer experience is dramatic, and it's what they expect and what you want to provide. So it starts at something simple like EDI. People for years and years have said EDI is dead. But I can tell you today that the majority of transactions that go through our commerce network are still EDI transactions. But we're beginning to see point of sale transactions. We're seeing XML transactions, APIs, a variety of technical lingo. The end result is that I'm getting real-time information back in that I can make better decisions based around, and that I can aggregate the demand for my product through orders, the supply of my product through inventory, all through that channel integration that we've talked about. Let's move to the next slide. Which brings us to inventory. Once again, if you think about online buying, people will research what you have in inventory at your specific location before they hop in their car and drive down to the store. They want to research the product, they want to research where it's available, they want to research how they can get it to them most cost effectively in the time frame that they believe they have the need. And so having accurate inventory information across the supply chain, not just what you have in your store, but also what you have in your distribution centers, what your suppliers may have in their inventory, and what they may actually have in their work in process that they know that they can deliver to you over a period of time. And so it's using that network effect and that collaboration between buyer and seller to pull that inventory information together in an accurate and timely way that can then drive the overall relative performance of being able to have your customers get the experience that they expect in terms of where do I buy it, how do I buy it, do I pick it up at store, do I deliver it to my home, if I deliver it, what means do I deliver it, but having inventory is one of those raw materials that's necessary to do it effectively. Let's move to the next slide. And that all kind of drives back to the fourth key enabler we see, which is the willingness and ability to collaborate. And I think it's a combination of things. Arvind mentioned collaborating between, again, buyers and sellers. There was a time in the world when I was first in this business where you had adversarial relationships between buyers and sellers. And in some cases that still exists. But in today's world, we really need to work hard on being collaborative and using technology like a commerce network, like EDI, like great point of sale solutions and back-end inventory management systems to make sure we've got the right information at our fingertips to be able to drive the results that we expect, both from our business, our customer experience, and our overall reputation. Because on the web, you're only as good as the last review that came through. And so being able to collaborate to make sure that you deliver on your expectations, your customers' expectations, becomes important. So it's making sure that you have a common understanding between buyer and seller of what's available from an inventory standpoint. What do I have in stock? What have I been selling? What do I need to have if I have promotions coming up? It's improving the ability for a retailer to know where in the process an order might be. Has it been shipped? If it's been shipped, where is it at in its journey from the buyer to the seller, so on and so forth. It's having that connection between the parties in the transaction, up to and including your consumer, to make sure that they've got full visibility and the full ability to deviate from the norm from a process standpoint if they see something going afoul in the process that they've set out. So collaboration, the willingness to collaborate, and the technology that underlies to give us the ability to collaborate becomes very, very important in this transformational process from a digitization standpoint. Let's move to the next slide. So my call to action from your standpoint is doing nothing is not the right answer. We've all thought about the pace of innovation. What can our company manage? What can our consumers consume? We've seen people that have made too rapid changes, which have alienated their customers or their internal consumers or internal stakeholders. But I always fall back on this Mark Twain quote, which says, continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. Waiting for things to be perfect is never the right answer, because it pretty much mandates that you're behind the competition in terms of rolling out new ideas and new collaborative techniques and ways to delight your customers to make sure they come back again. So I think our call to action coming out of the webinar today is hopefully we've given you some things to think about, and we've given you people to talk to in terms of advice about how to use these tools to improve the overall responsiveness and agility that Gartner says is so important from your supply chain and your business perspective. So Esther, I'm going to throw it back to you to see if we've got any folks online that might have some questions for Arvind and I.
Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, we're going to take some questions for the next few minutes, and you could just type them in the chat box below. And I'll just start with the first question that we received, which is, if you are a multi-brand retailer, what is the first thing you can do to achieve a more agile supply chain?
I will take that, Esther, thank you. So yeah, if you're a multi-brand retailer, or for that matter, single brand retailer, I think first thing first towards achieving any sort of agility so that you have responsiveness to the customer and the demand and overall experiences, to look into what Ross pointed out, through their massive network, collaborative network, they still see very large chunk of volume of transactions to be EDI. I would say get onto EDI bandwagon ASAP, figure out at the minimum, how do you communicate orders without having to getting those orders sent through emails, have more standardization around those orders, and have standardization around how those orders get shipped back from the vendor all the way back to your distribution center. So that would be my first thing, Esther. I would say every multi-brand retailer or a single brand retailer should consider as a first step towards optimization of the supply chain.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a crazy analogy at you as well, Arvind. I think that's very appropriate. When somebody asks me that question, I leverage back to Xfinity and Comcast, the underlying technology, and say, when you decided you wanted to watch football games at home, what was the first step you had to take? First step is I had to get wired into the network. I had to get connected. Once I was connected, then a lot of things happened that I could take advantage of high def. I could take advantage of custom channels or premium channels. I could get internet access. I could get security. I could get a phone system, but I had to get connected. So, to reinforce Arvind's point, I think the first step of a single brand, multi-brand retailer has to do is get connected. Get connected, begin transacting business with your key suppliers or partners, and take that first step, but being connected is the key.
Thank you so much for tuning in to our webinar. If you have any further questions, feel free to email them to us down below, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great day.